Marcus had always been the kind of man people trusted. Reliable. Sharp. The one executives leaned on when the room was falling apart. At 52, with salt and pepper hair and a reputation for loyalty, he was the steady right hand of a CEO who treated him like family. But even steady men crack. She walked into her father's office on a Tuesday afternoon, sunlight spilling through the glass walls like a spotlight meant just for her. Blonde, 25, with that effortless confidence only the young carry. Marcus had heard about her before. Rumors whispered through corridors about wild nights, bold choices, and the kind of beauty that drew attention without even asking. None of the whispers prepared him for the way she looked at him. "Hi," she said casually, leaning against the edge of her father's desk as if she owned it. Her eyes flicked over him, slow and deliberate. "You must be Marcus." He adjusted his tie, trying to mask the sudden jolt in his chest. "And you must be the boss's daughter." A smile curved across her lips. "You say that like it's a warning." "Maybe it is." Her laugh was low, almost teasing. "Funny. You don't look like the type my dad usually surrounds himself with." Marcus raised a brow. "And what type is that?" "Safe. Predictable. Young." He should have turned back to his notes, buried himself in spreadsheets and forecasts, pretended her words meant nothing. But instead, against his better judgment, he asked, "And what am I, then?" Her answer came like a blade wrapped in silk. "Older. And that's exactly what I like." The air caught in his lungs. He'd faced hostile boardrooms, mergers worth billions, even his own messy divorces, but nothing rattled him like the ease with which she delivered that confession. "You shouldn't say things like that," he muttered. "Why not?" she asked, tilting her head, watching him with a glint of mischief. "Because I'm the CEO's daughter? Or because you're afraid you might like hearing it?" His throat tightened. "Both." Her lips curved again, satisfied, as if she'd just won the first round of a game he hadn't agreed to play. That night, Marcus couldn't get her voice out of his head. He told himself it was just a moment, a flirtation, something he'd forget by morning. But the memory clung to him, the way her eyes lingered, the way her tone wrapped around him like a secret. The next time he saw her, she was waiting outside his office, 2 coffees in her hands. "Figured you could use one," she said, handing him the cup with that same dangerous smile. "Do you make a habit of distracting employees?" he asked, half joking, half serious. "Only the ones who look like they need it," she replied. It should have ended there. A joke, a coffee, nothing more. But the visits didn't stop. She slipped into his office under flimsy pretenses, questions about contracts, fake curiosity about revenue models, playful remarks that turned ordinary afternoons into something charged. Every glance was bait. Every word a dare. And Marcus, despite all his experience and discipline, took it every time. The first real crack came late one evening. The building was nearly empty, the office floors hushed. Marcus was still at his desk, sleeves rolled, eyes burning from hours of spreadsheets, when she appeared in the doorway. "You ever leave this place?" she asked. "Eventually," he muttered. "You need someone to drag you out." He gave her a look. "And you're volunteering?" She stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. "Maybe I am." The space between them was small, but charged like a live wire. She leaned on his desk, close enough for him to catch the scent of her perfume, close enough that the glow of the desk lamp painted her hair gold. "Marcus," she whispered, "do you ever think about me?" The question cut through him like glass. He should have denied it, pushed her away, reminded her of who her father was and what this meant. But the truth forced itself out before he could stop it. "Yes." Her breath caught, surprise flickering across her face before it softened into something else, satisfaction, hunger. And then she kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was heat and fire and all the rules he'd lived by snapping in one reckless second. Her hands gripped his shirt, his fingers tightened on her waist, and the neat order of his life collapsed under the weight of a single forbidden kiss. When they pulled apart, her smile was triumphant. "Told you," she whispered. "I like older men." Marcus sat there long after she left, staring at the door, trying to convince himself this was the end. That it had been a mistake, a moment they'd both forget. But deep down, he knew the truth. The moment had only been the beginning. Marcus told himself it would end there. A kiss, a line crossed in the heat of the moment, something he could lock away and pretend never happened. But the next morning, when he stepped into the office and saw her leaning against the reception desk with a knowing smile, he realized there was no undoing it. She didn't even say hello. She just looked at him in a way that burned through every layer of restraint he had built over the years. And then, with a casual wave, she disappeared into her father's office as if nothing had happened at all. The rest of the day was torture. She floated in and out of his orbit, asking small questions, lingering too close, brushing against him in the hallway. Each touch was harmless in isolation, but together they stacked into a storm he couldn't ignore. Marcus had spent decades mastering control, in meetings, in negotiations, in his personal life. But this wasn't something he could control. This was temptation in its purest form. One evening, when the office was nearly empty, she walked into his space without knocking. He was buried in quarterly reports, glasses perched on his nose, when she closed the door behind her. "You work too much," she said, sliding into the chair across from his desk. "It's called keeping your father's company afloat," Marcus replied, not looking up. "You don't need to impress him. He already trusts you more than anyone else here." Finally, Marcus lifted his eyes. "Then why are you here?" She smiled slowly. "Because I don't trust myself." The words hung between them, heavy and loaded. Marcus's chest tightened. He should have told her to leave, should have drawn a hard line before things spiraled. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You're playing a dangerous game." Her expression didn't waver. "Then play it with me." Something in him snapped. Weeks of glances, touches, and stolen tension boiled over. He pushed back from the desk, stood, and crossed the room before his mind could catch up with his body. When he kissed her this time, it wasn't hesitant. It was raw, hungry, inevitable. Her hands pulled at him, tugging him closer, while his fingers pressed into the curve of her waist. The polished desk that had seen nothing but contracts and numbers suddenly became the backdrop for something far less professional. The room filled with the sound of their breathing, urgent and unrestrained, as the lines between right and wrong blurred into nothingness. When it was over, she rested against his chest, smiling like she had won something monumental. "You finally broke a rule," she whispered. Marcus didn't answer. He knew this wasn't just breaking a rule. It was detonating a bomb beneath his entire life. The days that followed were a blur of secrecy and stolen moments. She slipped into his office under excuses that grew thinner with every visit. He found reasons to linger after hours, knowing she would appear with that daring smile. They carved out slivers of time wherever they could, quick kisses in deserted hallways, touches hidden behind closed doors, whispered promises that no one else could hear. But the risk grew sharper. The office had eyes, ears, and gossip traveled faster than truth. Marcus overheard whispers one afternoon, two junior analysts murmuring about how she seemed to spend a lot of time with him. They didn't know. Not yet. But suspicion had a way of blooming into certainty. That night, when she showed up again, Marcus nearly pushed her away. He thought about his career, his reputation, the trust her father had placed in him. He thought about everything he stood to lose. But when she leaned into him, her lips brushing his ear as she whispered, "You can't tell me you don't want this," all of those thoughts dissolved into ash. He kissed her harder than ever, desperate, reckless. He knew it was dangerous, knew it couldn't last, but in her arms, none of that mattered. Still, when he lay awake later in his apartment, the silence pressing down on him, the guilt clawed at his chest. He wasn't just breaking rules. He was betraying a man who had given him everything. But the next morning, when she caught his eye across the conference room and smirked like they shared a secret no one else in the world could touch, Marcus understood the cruel truth. He was too far gone to stop. And the worst part was, he didn't want to. Marcus had lived his life avoiding chaos. Every decision he made was measured, calculated, the kind of move a man built for survival made. But with her, chaos became routine. Every time she glanced at him, he felt the same rush as a man stepping off a cliff and trusting the fall. It only grew worse when her father decided she should shadow him full-time. Suddenly, she was everywhere, at meetings, at lunches, in his office under the guise of learning the ropes. For everyone else, it looked like mentorship. For Marcus, it was slow torture. She knew what she was doing. During presentations, she'd slide her leg just close enough to brush against his under the table. When he spoke in boardrooms, she'd tilt her head, watching him with eyes that told a story no one else could read. Every move she made whispered, "I dare you to keep pretending." The risk peaked one night when they stayed late. The office was dark except for the glow of his lamp, papers scattered across his desk. She leaned against the doorway, watching him like she always did. "You're addicted," she said softly. Marcus looked up, weary but unflinching. "Addicted to what?" "To me." She crossed the room, slow steps echoing in the empty building. "You try to fight it, but you can't. That's why you're still here. Why I'm still here." He swallowed hard. "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do." Her voice was calm, steady, terrifying in its certainty. She perched on the edge of his desk, close enough that he could feel the heat of her body. "You want me. And you hate yourself for it. But you still want me." The dam broke again. He pulled her to him, kissing her with a hunger that came from weeks of restraint tearing loose. She melted into him, arms wrapping around his neck, pulling him deeper. Neither of them noticed the sound at first. The faint click of shoes down the hallway. The muffled hum of a voice. Marcus froze, his heart slamming into his ribs. Her eyes widened too. They both knew that sound. Her father. Marcus shoved back from the desk, breath ragged, trying to fix his tie, his hair, anything to erase what had just happened. She smirked at him, wicked even in the face of danger, and hopped off the desk just as the door opened. "There you are," her father said, stepping inside. His expression was tired, distracted. "Both of you still here?" Marcus forced a laugh. "Going over projections." His voice sounded foreign to his own ears. "Good," the CEO said with a nod. "I like that she's learning from you, Marcus. You're the best example she could have." The words landed like a blade in Marcus's gut. Best example. If only the man knew. After her father left, she leaned in close, whispering with a grin, "See? He trusts you completely. Almost too much." It should have been a warning. Instead, it was gasoline on the fire. The affair deepened after that. Recklessness became part of the thrill. They stole moments in stairwells, elevators, even in the back of her father's car during a late-night corporate event. Every encounter carried the risk of ruin, and that danger only seemed to make her want it more. Marcus, for all his discipline, wasn't immune. Each time he told himself it was the last, but when she touched him, the rest of the world vanished. He hadn't realized how empty his life had become until she filled it. Messy, unpredictable, intoxicating. But he also knew it couldn't last. Whispers in the office grew louder. A colleague made a passing joke about how much time the CEO's daughter seemed to enjoy mentorship sessions. Marcus laughed it off, but his stomach turned cold. The breaking point came on a Sunday morning. He was at home, drinking coffee, trying to forget the taste of her lips from the night before, when his phone rang. Her voice was urgent, almost trembling. "We need to talk." An hour later, she was in his apartment, pacing like a storm. "My dad's starting to ask questions," she said, running her hands through her hair. "He asked me last night if I was seeing someone. He suspects something, Marcus." He felt the blood drain from his face. "What did you tell him?" "That it was none of his business." She stopped pacing, finally meeting his eyes. "But this won't stay hidden forever. You know that." Marcus's chest tightened. He had spent his whole life building this career, this reputation. Losing it would mean losing everything. But when he looked at her, standing there in his living room, fire in her eyes, he realized he couldn't picture walking away either. "You're not afraid, are you?" she asked softly. "Of course I'm afraid," he admitted. "I'd be a fool not to be." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Then be a fool with me." Marcus closed his eyes, exhaling like a man caught between two cliffs with no ground beneath him. Logic screamed at him to end it. But when her hand slipped into his, warm and certain, he knew the truth he'd been denying for weeks. He was already hers, no matter the cost.